After my wife died, her two sons said, "We want the entire estate, the business, everything." My attorney begged me to fight back. I said, "Give it all to them." Everyone thought I'd lost my mind. At the final hearing, I signed the papers. They were grinning until their lawyer's face went white, reading the fine print. They wanted everything, and I was about to give them something they deserved far more than they ever expected. Now you're probably wondering what happened in that room. I'll tell you everything. But first comment your city below. I'm curious where you're watching this from. The funeral flowers were still fresh when they came for everything. I sat in Catherine's reading chair by the window, the one with the worn armrest, where she'd rested her coffee cup every morning for 22 years. The leather still held the faint scent of her perfume. Outside, the Minnesota winter pressed against the glass, turning our Adena neighborhood into something from a Christmas card. Beautiful, cold, unforgiving. The study door opened without a knock. Craig entered first, his younger brother Nathan half a step behind. Both wore dark suits, expensive ones. The kind I'd helped pay for back when helping still meant something. Craig had that look he got in courtrooms, all sharp angles and calculated confidence. Nathan's face carried something softer, almost apologetic. Almost. "Daniel." Craig didn't sit. Power move. "We need to discuss some practical matters." Practical matters. 3 days after we'd buried his mother, I gestured to the chairs. Neither took them. "The estate." Craig continued pulling a folder from his briefcase. "We've reviewed everything with our attorney. Mom's will is clear about asset distribution." Nathan shifted his weight. At least he looked uncomfortable. "There's the life insurance policy," Craig said. $250,000. That goes to you." A pause. The kind attorneys use before delivering bad news. However, there are outstanding medical bills from Mom's final care. Approximately $215,000. The math hit me like a punch. $35,000. 22 years of marriage, and I'd walk away with $35,000. "The house here," Craig gestured around us, valued at $1.1 million. The cabin at Lake Minnetonka, $920,000. Business assets, roughly $550,000. Those passed to Nathan and myself. "Bloodline," Nathan added quietly, as if that one word explained everything, as if genetics trumped 2 decades of living, loving raising them as my own. "You'll have 30 days to make arrangements," Craig said. "We think that's more than fair." Fair. I looked at Craig's tie, navy, with silver stripes. I'd bought it when he made partner. "Wear it to celebrate," I'd told him. He'd hugged me, called me Dad for the first time in years. Nathan's watch caught the afternoon light. Tag Heuer, his 40th birthday gift from Catherine and me. They were wearing my generosity while dismantling my future. "I see," I managed. Craig's shoulders relaxed slightly. He'd expected a fight. "We'll have the paperwork ready next week. Just signatures." They left without looking back. The door clicked shut with a softness that felt like violence. I sat there as shadows lengthened across Catherine's desk. 22 years. I'd raised these boys. Not biologically, their father had vanished when they were teenagers, but in every way that mattered. Or so I'd thought. Craig's law school graduation flashed through my mind. How we'd spent nights at this very desk, working through constitutional law. Precedents. The pride in his eyes when he passed the bar. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad." Nathan's wedding. His biological father hadn't bothered to show. I'd walked him down the aisle at St. Mark's, his hand trembling in mine. "I'm grateful you're here," he'd whispered before the music started. These were the men who just gave me 30 days to vacate my own home. Night fell. I didn't turn on the lights. Catherine's desk drawer caught my eye, the personal one she always kept locked. Except now it sat slightly ajar, as if she'd left it open on purpose. As if she'd known I'd need to look. Inside, beneath old photographs and her reading glasses, lay a single brass key, small, worn smooth from handling. I'd never seen it before. I turned it over in my palm, and something shifted in my chest. Not quite hope, but something close. Catherine had been meticulous about everything. She wouldn't have left a random key in an unlocked drawer. Through the window, I saw Craig and Nathan standing by Craig's BMW in the driveway. Even from here, I could read their body language, relaxed, celebratory. Craig's hand clapped Nathan's shoulder. They were already dividing up their inheritance. Neither looked back at the house where they'd grown up, at the man who'd raised them. I closed my fingers around the key. Tomorrow, I'd find out what it unlocked. Tonight, I'd let them celebrate their victory. They had no idea that Catherine had always played the long game. Every move calculated every piece in place before she made her final stand. And in 22 years of marriage, she'd taught me well. The morning light filtered through Catherine's office window, pale and cold. I hadn't slept. The brass key sat on the desk in front of me, catching the weak winter sun. I'd been staring at it for an hour when my phone rang. "Dad?" Jacob's voice cracked slightly. I heard. 7 in the morning. He must have gotten up before dawn to call. "Word travels fast," I said. "Mrs. Brown from next door called me last night. Said she saw Craig and Nathan leaving yesterday looking like they'd won the lottery." He paused. "Dad, I can be there in 4 hours. I'm already packing." "No, Dad." "Jacob, listen to me." I kept my voice steady. "This is something I need to handle my way." Silence on the other end. "Then they're taking everything, aren't they?" I thought about lying. But Jacob had never asked me for anything. Not tuition money when he decided art school wasn't for him. Not seed capital when he started freelancing. Not a loan when his truck broke down last winter. He'd built his life in Grand Marais on his own terms in a cabin he'd renovated himself, selling paintings to tourists and doing graphic design for small businesses. He'd driven down every single week when Catherine got sick, sitting with her for hours, reading to her, bringing her sketches of Lake Superior. Craig and Nathan hadn't visited once in 3 months. "Yeah," I said finally. "They are. That's bullshit." His anger was clean, uncomplicated. "You raised them. You paid for Craig's law school. You walked Nathan down the aisle at his wedding. And this is how they're still her son's Jacob? They never deserved you." His voice was fierce. "Not for one damn day." My throat tightened. "I appreciate that." "So what are you going to do, fight them?" I looked at the key again. "I don't know yet. Whatever you decide, I'm here. Always." He meant it. I could hear it in every syllable. "Not because you're my dad, because you're the best man I know." After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment. Then I picked up the key, slipped it into my pocket, and drove to Howard Pierce's office. Howard's office smelled like old leather and coffee. He'd been Catherine's attorney for 15 years, had drafted both our wills, handled the business transfers. When I laid out what Craig and Nathan had told me, he went pale. "Daniel, this doesn't sound right." He pulled up files on his computer, frowning. "There are some irregularities here. You should contest this. You have grounds." "How long would that take?" "Months, maybe years." He leaned forward. "But the debts would consume your insurance payout long before we reached any settlement. You'd be left with nothing either way." I felt the weight of the key in my pocket. What if I just gave them everything? Howard stared at me. That would be insane. "How fast could we process it?" "Daniel." "How fast, Howard?" He exhaled slowly. "A week, maybe less if we push." "Then let's do it." "Why would you—" "Maybe that's what Catherine wanted." I stood. "Get the paperwork ready." Howard looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. I was halfway to my car when my phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. "Family dinner tonight. Let's make this transition smooth for everyone." I stared at the word family. 22 years of school plays and broken arms and teaching them to drive and sitting through Craig's law school graduation and dancing with Nicole at her wedding. 22 years, and now I was just a transaction to be processed. I texted back. "What time?" His response came immediately. 7 p.m. Our place. I sat in the car, engine off, watching my breath fog the windows. The key was still in my pocket. Whatever it opened, whatever Catherine had hidden it, could wait one more day. Tonight I'd go to their dinner, I'd smile, I'd play along. Because Catherine had taught me something in 22 years of marriage. Patience was its own kind of power, and I was just getting started. Nathan's house sat on a tree-lined street in St. Paul's Highland Park neighborhood. Colonial architecture, white pillars, a circular driveway with 2 luxury cars parked like sentries. I pulled my old Honda up behind Craig's BMW and sat for a moment watching the golden light spill from the windows. 22 years ago, Nathan had been a gangly kid who couldn't balance a checkbook. Now he lived in a house that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Nicole answered the door in a designer dress that probably cost what I used to spend on groceries for a month. Her smile was brilliant, practiced. "Daniel, so glad you could make it." She air-kissed both my cheeks. "We wanted this to be special." The dining room could have been photographed for a magazine. Candles, fresh flowers, china I didn't recognize. Craig was already there, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal glass. He stood when I entered, offered his hand like we were closing a business deal. "Good to see you, Daniel." I shook it. His grip was firm, aggressive. The watch on his wrist, the one I'd given him when he passed the bar exam, caught the candlelight. Dinner was salmon with some kind of glazed wine that Nicole announced was from a private vineyard in Napa. Everything tasted like ashes in my mouth, but I smiled and nodded and complimented the meal. "We wanted to make this transition as painless as possible," Nathan said, sliding a leather folder across the table. "Our attorney prepared everything. Just a few signatures and we can all move forward." I opened the folder. Legal documents dense with terms I barely understood. Transfer of assets. Quitclaim deeds. My entire life with Catherine reduced to checkboxes and signature lines. "There's no rush," I said slowly. Craig leaned forward. "Actually, there kind of is. Estate taxes, probate timelines. These things have deadlines." "Right," I set down my fork. "Speaking of paperwork, I found some documents I don't quite understand." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "What kind of documents?" Nathan's voice was too casual. "Bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of." I watched their faces. "Business filings, some kind of transfer records." I paused. "And a safety deposit box key." Nathan's fork clattered against his plate. Craig went very still, his glass frozen halfway to his lips. Nicole jumped in too quickly. "Dessert? Who wants dessert?" "I'm sure it's nothing," Craig said, but his jaw was tight. "Mom had a lot of paperwork. She was meticulous like that. Don't worry about it. We'll sort through everything." Catherine would have wanted me to understand it all, though. I kept my voice gentle, confused. She was always so careful about making sure I knew where things stood. "Of course." Nathan recovered first, reaching for his wine. "We'll get you copies of everything. Full transparency." But his hand shook slightly as he drank. The rest of the meal was awkward, stilted. Nicole tried to fill the silence with chatter about their vacation plans, but it felt like static. When I finally stood to leave, the relief in the room was palpable. "Thanks for coming," Nathan said at the door. "We'll be in touch about the signing." "Sure thing." I shook his hand, felt it clammy against mine. "Take care." In my rearview mirror, I watched Craig step into the driveway, phone already pressed to his ear. His gestures were sharp, agitated, pacing. Whatever he was saying couldn't wait. I smiled for the first time in days. Catherine used to say, "If you want to see someone's true nature, make them think they're about to lose everything." I was starting to see very clearly. Tomorrow I'd find out what that key opened. Tonight I'd let them panic, because scared people made mistakes, and I was counting on it. I found the card in Catherine's wallet the next morning, tucked behind her driver's license. Plain white cardstock. First Bank, Minnesota, Nicollet Mall. Handwritten below box 379. The panic in Craig's eyes last night had told me everything I needed to know. The bank manager, Sharon Clark, examined my ID and the key with quiet efficiency. "Right this way, Mr. Hewitt." The vault was all marble silence and metal boxes. She found 379, inserted her key alongside mine, and the door swung open. "Take all the time you need." Inside were manila folders, neatly labeled in Catherine's handwriting. I spread them across the small table. The first was labeled Communications. Emails printed and highlighted. The earliest dated 8 months ago, 2 months after Catherine's diagnosis. From Craig to someone named Marcus Smith. "The old man's getting worse. Mom says he's barely sleeping. Once she's gone, he won't be a problem. Daniel never paid attention to the business side anyway." I forced myself to keep reading. "Nathan's on board. We just need to wait it out. The estate's worth at least $3 million. Split 2 ways we can both clear our debts and start fresh." There were dozens more. Plans, timelines, calculations. My wife's funeral discussed like a business opportunity. The second folder was labeled Accounts. Bank statements for Hewitt Holdings, LLC. I scanned the numbers twice. $6.2 million. A post-it note in Catherine's handwriting. "Our real savings, my love. The boys think everything's in the real estate. Let them." She'd moved money systematically over the past year, restructured and hidden while Craig and Nathan planned their inheritance. She'd known for 8 months exactly what they were doing. The third folder made me sick. Private investigation report by Foster Investigations. Photos of Craig at a Las Vegas casino. Debts to Pyramid Capital Group, $310,000. Nathan's file was worse. Wire transfers flagged as fraud. Forged signatures. The investigator's note. Subject engaged in systematic embezzlement. Criminal charges likely. Nathan owed $380,000 in restitution. They hadn't just been waiting for her to die. They'd been desperate. The fourth folder was thin. Medical records. A single letter from Dr. Patricia Alvarez, neurologist, dated 6 weeks before Catherine's death. Patient Catherine Hewitt remains cognitively intact and fully competent to make legal and financial decisions. Recent claims of diminished capacity are unfounded. Someone had tried to declare her incompetent. I didn't need to guess who. The last folder contained 2 wills. The first, dated 2 years ago, divided assets equally among surviving spouse and Catherine's 2 sons. The second, dated 6 weeks before her death, left everything to Daniel Michael Hewitt. 2 addendums, gift deeds for the Adena House and Lake Minnetonka property, executable at my discretion. At the bottom, original, held by Samuel Foster, attorney at law. I sat there, the vault silent except for the hum of climate control. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. This wasn't just protection. This was strategy. Catherine had turned their greed into a trap, left them properties they wanted, but mortgaged so heavily the debt outweighed the value. She'd hidden our real assets, documented their crimes, given me choices. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because she'd loved me enough to fight a war I didn't even know was happening. At the bottom of the box, beneath everything else, lay a single envelope, my name in her distinctive script. Below it, 3 words. Read this last. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The final piece. I broke the seal. The envelope contained 3 pages, handwritten in Catherine's careful script. My hands steadied as I began to read. My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, you've found everything. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I needed you to see their true faces without my interpretation. She'd discovered their plan 8 months ago. Overheard Craig on the phone in our kitchen. Maybe 6 months, if we're lucky. The old man won't be a problem. He doesn't know anything about the business anyway. That's when she'd hired Samuel Foster, a private investigator and former FBI agent. Craig owed $310,000 in gambling debts to people who didn't accept late payments. Nathan had defrauded elderly clients of $380,000 and was 1 audit away from criminal charges. I found the emails. Daniel. Craig wrote, once Mom's gone, the old man won't be a problem. This from the boy you put through law school, the boy who called you Dad at graduation, who you walked down the aisle at his wedding. Her handwriting wavered slightly. This is how they chose to repay 22 years of love. But Catherine hadn't just grieved. She'd acted. I've taken steps, my love. The real money. Our money is safe in an account only you can access. The boys have no idea. The properties they're eager to inherit. I've arranged things, not the way they think. Samuel will explain the details. The new will left everything to me. The original was in Samuel's office. You have 3 choices documented in Samuel's files. Keep everything. Give them the properties, or pursue criminal charges. The choice is yours. Near the end, her tone softened. Tell Jacob his paintings reminded me that beauty still exists, even when hearts break. He's more your son than the 2 I gave birth to. The final paragraph blurred as tears filled my eyes. I love you, Daniel. The game is yours now. Play it however you see fit. Just promise me one thing, don't let them make you bitter. You're too good a man for that. I sat in that vault, holding those pages like glass, then called Samuel Foster. Samuel's office was in Uptown above a coffee shop. He was 62, gray, beard-sharp eyes. He shook my hand firmly. Mr. Hewitt, Catherine spoke highly of you. She left me quite a puzzle. She left you options. He spread documents across his desk. Let me show you the full picture. The Adena House market value, $1.1 million. Mortgaged for $1.4 million. The Lake Minnetonka property worth $920,000. Mortgaged for $1.1 million. They're underwater by $600,000 total, Samuel said. Your stepsons think they're inheriting assets. They're actually inheriting debt. She mortgaged our homes. She created a trap. The properties transfer with the debt attached. They can't sell without covering the difference. He leaned back. Catherine called it her poison pill. He walked me through the 3 options Catherine had laid out. Catherine wanted consequences, not revenge, Samuel said quietly. The account she mentioned. Transfers to your name this week. You're a wealthy man, Mr. Hewitt. My phone rang. Craig, I let it ring 4 times. Daniel. His voice was tight. We need to talk. Someone from a law office called Nathan. This is very concerning. I looked at Samuel. He mouthed tomorrow. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Craig continued. Howard Pierce's office. Bring that Foster guy. I'll be there. I hung up. Samuel smiled slightly. They're scared. Good, I said. They should be. That night, I called Jacob from Catherine's office, the letters still spread across her desk. Tomorrow, I told him. Everything happens tomorrow. You want me there? No. But I wanted you to know. I paused. You were right about them. You've always been right. His voice was quiet. I'm proud of you, Dad. I didn't sleep. At 9:55 the next morning, Samuel and I walked into Howard Pierce's building. The elevator ride felt like descending into a battlefield. The conference room was exactly what I expected. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Minneapolis. Craig sat at the head of the table like he owned the place, expensive suit, perfectly pressed. Nathan fidgeted beside him, tie slightly crooked. Nicole stared at her phone, thumbs moving rapidly. Howard stood by the windows, looking uncomfortable. Craig stood when we entered. Daniel? His smile didn't reach his eyes. He gestured toward Samuel. And you are? Samuel Foster, Mrs. Hewitt's attorney. Howard turned sharply. I'm Catherine's attorney. You were, Samuel said pleasantly. She retained me 6 weeks before her death. Filed all the necessary paperwork. Would you like to see the documentation? Craig's jaw tightened. There seemed to be some irregularities with the estate. We wanted to address them before moving forward with the transfer. Irregularities. Samuel set his briefcase on the table. Interesting word choice. He clicked it open. Let's talk about irregularities. He pulled out a stack of printed emails, spread them across the mahogany like a hand of cards. I watched the color drain from Craig's face. These are communications between Craig Thompson and Marcus Smith, beginning 8 months ago. Samuel's voice was calm, almost gentle. Would you like me to read some highlights? Silence. The old man's getting worse. Once Mom's gone, he won't be a problem. Samuel looked up. That's you, Daniel. The old man who put Craig through law school. Craig's hands clenched. That's taken out of context. Daniel never paid attention to the business side anyway. We just need to wait it out. Samuel pulled out another page. Or this one, Nathan's on board. Estate's worth at least $3 million. Split 2 ways we can both clear our debts. Nathan had gone completely white. Nicole's phone hung forgotten in her hand. These are private, Craig started. There are 47 more, Samuel interrupted. Should I keep reading? Howard had moved closer to the table, staring at the emails. Catherine knew about these. She hired me after she overheard the first conversation. Samuel produced another document. She also had concerns about her cognitive capacity being questioned, so she had Dr. Patricia Alvarez conduct a full evaluation. He slid the letter across to Howard. The doctor found her completely competent to make legal decisions. Howard read it, face going pale. They tried to declare her incompetent. Someone filed preliminary paperwork, Samuel said. It was withdrawn after the neurologist's evaluation. Craig shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. We were trying to help. Help? The word came out before I could stop it. All eyes turned to me. You were planning my wife's funeral while she was still alive, calculating how to divide her assets, calling me a problem to be managed. Dad, Nathan's voice cracked. It wasn't like that. Don't, I held up my hand. Don't call me that. Not now. Samuel reached into his briefcase again. The emails are just the beginning, he said quietly. Let's talk about why you both needed money so desperately. He pulled out 2 more folders, one red, one blue. Craig's eyes locked on the red one. Nathan stared at the blue. They knew. In that moment, I watched them realize the truth. Catherine had known everything. Samuel opened the red folder first, slowly, deliberately, like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Casino receipts spilled across the table. Pyramid Capital Group letterhead. Payment demand notices. Photos of Craig at blackjack tables in Las Vegas, chips stacked high, transaction records showing cash advances, wire transfers, desperate attempts to stay ahead. $310,000, Samuel said quietly, owed to people who don't accept payment plans. Howard stared at Craig. 300,000. Craig's jaw worked. No words came. Samuel closed the red folder and opened the blue one. Wire transfer records. Client complaints filed with the Minnesota Board of Accountancy. Detailed ledgers showing money moved from elderly clients into Nathan's accounts. Names and faces. Helen Henderson, 83. Brown, 76. Margaret Kowalski, 81. $380,000, Samuel said. Systematic embezzlement disguised as investment advice. Classic Ponzi structure. Nathan's face went gray. Those were failed investments. Did you tell Mrs. Henderson about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands? Samuel's voice was steel. The ones the state auditor is investigating. Silence. I leaned forward. Explain to me how you justify stealing from an 83-year-old woman. Nathan's mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted to Craig, desperate. Nicole's voice was barely a whisper. Nathan, what did you do? It was temporary, Nathan started. It was fraud, Samuel interrupted. And elder abuse. Both felonies, Mrs. Henderson filed a complaint 3 weeks ago. He pulled out another document, placed it center table. 2 wills. The first, dated 2 years ago, divides the estate equally. The second, executed 6 weeks before Catherine's death, leaves everything to Daniel Michael Hewitt. Craig lunged forward, snatching it. This isn't valid. Dad's not mentally competent. Mr. Hewitt isn't executing this will. He's the beneficiary. Catherine was evaluated by a neurologist who found her fully competent. Samuel paused. She also fired Howard's firm 5 months ago when she suspected information leaks. Howard's head snapped toward Craig. You had access to my files. I needed to know, Craig started. You violated attorney-client privilege. Howard's voice shook. I could be disbarred. The room erupted. Nathan whirled on Craig. You said this plan would work. You said we just had to wait her out. Shut up, Craig hissed. You said she'd never find out. I said shut up? They were turning on each other, and I watched these men I'd raised reduced to criminals, blaming each other for getting caught. Samuel raised one hand. Silence fell. There's one more thing, he said almost cheerfully. Those properties you've been fighting over, let's discuss their actual value. He pulled out property assessments, mortgage documents, loan statements. Craig and Nathan leaned forward despite everything. They still thought they could salvage something. They had no idea Catherine's final move was the cruelest one of all. Samuel laid out the property documents with surgical precision. The Adena House, current market value $1.1 million. Outstanding mortgage $1.4 million. He paused. Underwater by $300,000. Craig's face went blank. The Lake Minnetonka property, market value $920,000. Mortgage $1.1 million. Underwater by $180,000. That's impossible, Nathan whispered. Catherine took out these mortgages 8 months ago. The money went into Hewitt Holdings, which transfers to Daniel this week. The properties transfer with the debt attached. Samuel looked at them calmly. Total negative equity, $600,000. Nathan stared at the documents. So we'd inherit debt. Exactly. Catherine engineered it. Her poison pill. I laughed. The sound startled everyone. I stood, walked to the windows overlooking Nicollet Mall, then turned back. For 22 years I raised you, loved you like my own blood. My voice was steady. And you planned my wife's funeral like a business transaction. Craig opened his mouth. I held up my hand. Catherine gave you exactly what you planned to give me, nothing wrapped in pretty paper. Samuel pulled out 2 gift deeds, already notarized. I'm gifting you both properties. Everything you wanted, along with all the debt. Nathan's eyes widened. We can't afford. You have 30 days to refinance or sell. After that foreclosure. I looked at Craig. You understand how this works. We won't sign, Craig said weakly. Samuel opened his briefcase. Then criminal charges. Elder abuse, wire fraud, forgery. The state attorney general wants Nathan's case. Mrs. Henderson wants to press charges. He paused. Craig, your gambling debts involve interstate commerce, federal jurisdiction. Debt or prison, I said quietly. 60 seconds. The clock ticked. Nicole cried softly. Nathan looked at Craig, waiting for him to fix this. But there was nothing left to fix. Craig picked up the pen. His hand shook as he signed. Nathan followed, tears streaming. Samuel gathered the documents. Howard stood frozen, staring at Craig, like seeing him for the first time. "We're done here," I said. I looked at Howard. "I'm sorry you got caught up in this." He nodded, stunned. I looked at Craig and Nathan one last time. They looked small, diminished. "Goodbye." I walked out into the hallway. The winter sun streamed through the atrium, bright and clean. I called Jacob. "It's done," I said. "Really done." "How do you feel?" "Lighter. Tired, but lighter." "Come up to Grand Marais," Jacob said. "Lake Superior in winter will clear your head. Stay as long as you want." I looked around at downtown Minneapolis, the city where I'd spent 22 years building a family that was never really mine. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." For the first time in years, I didn't know what came next, and it felt like freedom. Spring came to Duluth like a whispered promise. Ice on Lake Superior cracked and shifted, revealing dark water. I stood on my deck overlooking the lake, watching gulls circle in clean morning air. 3 months since the conference room. 3 months since I'd walked away from Minneapolis. My house was simple. 2 bedrooms, big windows, nothing fancy. I'd sold most of what I owned, kept only what mattered. Catherine's paintings hung in the living room. Her coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter. The brass key rested on my desk. The money from Hewitt Holdings sat largely untouched. $6.2 million I barely thought about. I'd bought this house outright, set up a modest budget, left the rest alone. Samuel called occasionally with updates. Craig had declared bankruptcy within 6 weeks. Lost his law license after the bar investigated Howard's complaint. He was working as a paralegal in Des Moines, attending Gamblers Anonymous twice a week. Nathan's accounting firm had dissolved. 3 former clients filed civil suits. Criminal charges were pending, but his attorney was negotiating a plea deal. He'd taken a night manager position at a hotel in St. Paul. Nicole had filed for divorce. I didn't feel triumphant. They'd gotten what they'd earned. Catherine had been right. Consequences weren't the same as revenge. Every other weekend I drove to Grand Marais. Jacob's cabin sat back from the highway, surrounded by birch trees and quiet. We'd sit on his porch with coffee, watching light change on the lake. "You look lighter, Dad," he said one Saturday in April. "Like you finally put something heavy down." "I have," I said. He'd painted something for me. Lake Superior and winter ice and gray water and a single figure on the shore. "That's you," he said. "After everything. Still standing." I hung it over my fireplace with more care than I'd hung anything in my life. The real gift wasn't the painting. It was sitting there with my son, drinking coffee, talking about nothing important. That was the inheritance Catherine had really given me. Not money or revenge, just clarity to see what mattered. In late April, Stephanie Barnes called. Samuel's daughter ran a nonprofit helping victims of financial elder abuse. "Dad mentioned your situation," she said. "Would you consider sharing your story, helping others recognize the warning signs?" I thought about Helen Henderson, 83, robbed by a man I'd raised. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." Once a month, I drove to Minneapolis and sat in community centers. I told my story so someone else might recognize the patterns, might know they weren't alone. The best use of Catherine's gift wasn't spending it. It was building something that mattered. One evening in early May, I sat on the Duluth Pier, watching sunset over Lake Superior. The water was glass smooth, reflecting pink and gold. I held Catherine's mug and thought about the woman who'd loved me enough to fight a war I didn't know was happening. She'd given me choices, and I'd chosen the 4th option. She probably knew I would walk away from anger and build something new. The money was just numbers. The real inheritance was knowing I didn't need it to feel whole. I'd chosen justice over revenge, peace over bitterness, a small house in Duluth over a mansion filled with ghosts. The brass key sat on my desk at home. I'd never tried to see if it opened anything else. Maybe it wasn't meant to open a lock. Maybe it was meant to open my eyes. If you face something like this, you're not alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes freedom looks like a small house and a son who never asked for anything but gave you everything. What would you do in my position? Mission accomplished, my love. Mission accomplished. Looking back on this true story, I see the signs were always there. the distance, the calculations disguised as concern. These grandpa stories, we tell ourselves that family will always be there, that blood is thicker than water. Sometimes they blind us to the truth. If you're facing something similar, don't do what I did. Don't ignore your instincts. Don't excuse betrayal because of blood. I spent 22 years building a family on hope instead of honesty, and it nearly destroyed me. Here's what this true story taught me. Real family isn't about DNA. It's about who shows up when there's nothing to gain. Jacob taught me that. Catherine knew it, and God in his mercy gave me clarity to finally understand. Proverbs says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. I didn't guard mine, but God also teaches that consequences aren't cruelty, they're justice. When I stood in that conference room, I wasn't seeking revenge. I was trusting that God's plan was bigger than my pain. This experience broke me open, but I learned what mattered. Not money, not properties, just peace. Just the quiet knowledge that I'd chosen integrity over bitterness. My lesson from these grandpa stories: we live and tell, love fiercely, but don't be blind. Trust but verify. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Family should protect you, not prey on you. What's your true story? Have you faced betrayal from those you trusted? These grandpa stories aren't just mine, they're lessons we share. Drop your thoughts below. If this resonated, subscribe to the channel. Sometimes we all need to know we're not alone.